Welcome to Sasquatch Theory. I'm Miguel Ramirez, the host of the show. Today we're in Ohio with Andrea, a witness whose encounters went from curious to terrifying. She was first drawn into the research after hearing about a man who was followed out of the woods. Then Andrea experienced it herself. She says she was followed out of the woods by a mother and a juvenile. She was hearing whistles communicating back and forth and something mimicking an owl. Andrea also claimed she saw a massive black arm and she saw a creature that vanished when she was driving on the road. She decided to get out of the vehicle and investigate the area for herself after seeing the strange movement across the road, and she claims she saw a Sasquatch that was swaying back and forth. Later, she encountered a tall, skinny brown Sasquatch, and she claims that it was well-groomed. If you would like to help support the channel, please be sure to listen to the podcast, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you have a Bigfoot encounter you would like to share with me, please get in touch with me sometime. Alright, with all that being said, let's dive into Andrea's Bigfoot encounters from the state of Ohio. All right, Andrea, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. And you?
Doing excellent. Thank you so much for asking, Andrea. If you would, tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Well, my name is Andrea Schneider, and I'm from Ohio, Massillon, Ohio. And first of all, I'd like to say that I've never in my entire life would ever think that I would see the big guy. And I was always into music. I was always into following bands. And I remember back in the 70s, I know UFOs were kind of popular back then, but I didn't really care. You know what I'm saying? I loved looking at the stars and stargazing and such, but Bigfoot was, nah. So one day, I like having fun. I like talking with other people. One day, a couple of us went to the senior center and they were having some show on Bigfoot or something. And I said, oh, let's just go for the fun of it. So we went, and it was this man who was telling his story about a couple of friends of himself went to Wills Creek, which is in Conshohocken, Ohio. And he was going Bigfooting, and it was about the time he says that the video cameras came out. And like a man, he said that he never even read the directions. So I thought that was kind of funny because my brothers are the same way. But he also said that he was walking. They all went separately, and he was walking, and he heard that every time he would take a step, he would hear something like taking a step too. And it was following, like he could hear that, but he got real scared, and he thought it was back in the days a hunter. There was in the newspaper article a hunter that was killing other hunters, and I was kind of worried because my dad and my three brothers were always hunting and fishing, and they never came back with any crazy stories. But needless to say, I fell for this guy. And then he said he saw the trees moving, like the bushes were like swaying back and forth, and he couldn't figure out why, because it was no wind. So he takes out his camera and he's using his, to make it bigger. And then at the same time, he's telling this story, but I'm also watching this video. So at this video, I see an ape-like juvenile looking around a tree. And I'm going, what the heck is that? And so that's when I got hooked, because I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that this actually was something in Ohio. And then they had the tracks, or how do you say, the castings and so on and so forth. So I just kind of looked around, but that always stuck in my mind, this encounter he had. So I started watching like YouTube and about salt pork, and I knew that he was in charge of the conference in Ohio at the salt pork conference. So I thought, well, maybe I'll save up some money and I'll go down there and just to have some fun. But I could never get any friends to go with me because that's not what they weren't into Bigfoot. So I usually would go by myself. And I went a couple of times down to, well, I should say I would go every year. And I would meet people and talk with people and just kind of, just overhear people's stories. And I remember when I first started going, people were talking about orbs and UFOs and connecting that with Bigfoot. And I'm going, oh my God, what are these people smoking? Wacky tobacco or what? I just thought maybe they're from the 60s. And I thought, oh, geez. And then every year I'd go back. It's like I'd hear other stories. One kid was a little younger kid, a little boy, and he was picking berries, and he and his brother were together, and he hears this whistle, and I'm listening to this guy tell the story, and this guy is shaking and sweating, and he said he reached out, he heard a whistle, and he turned away, but he felt a hairy, something hairy, and I'm going, oh crap. I couldn't believe it. So it was always about listening to other people's stories. I'd never had my other encounter, and I never thought I would ever envision seeing a Bigfoot. So every year I, meet people, and then I heard this story about one year they had some kind of a fishing tournament on the lake. People were fishing, and they saw a male and a female walking on the beach. So I guess one of the guys came up and talked to somebody and said, hey, look, we saw this, and we know it's Bigfoot weekend or the conference, and we thought you might want to know. So this guy, Walter, wants to go to this trail that leads down to that beach. Now, mind you, this is a story. And so he says to his friends, let's go down there and we will go early in the morning. And there was still fog on the ground. And he gets there and there's nobody there. So he thought to himself, well, maybe they left without me. I'll just go. So he's walking on this trail, the Shadbush Trail, and it's behind the playground by the campground at Salt Fork. So he's walking, and he said he hears this chattering. So he turns to the left, and he goes, hey, wait a minute, guys, wait for me. And so he sees the male and the female. So he runs, and he takes this picture. And so I thought, oh, my gosh, I got to see this picture. I want to meet this guy. I want to go, where he saw this. So every year I'd go, and I was always looking, on YouTube or, just trying to overhear people talking. And I remember on YouTube, I remember seeing a video of a kid with a little baby Sasquatch coming out of the forest. And then the next thing I knew, it was gone. They must have taken it down. Then one year I see a YouTube video of a couple girls that were camping, and then they heard that they did the wood knock, and they didn't believe in Bigfoot, but they did the wood knock, and then later that night, about 1:00 in the morning, they said they heard something pulling the grass and munching. So they opened that flap in the back of the tent, and they started videotaping with their camera, and it looked just like a chimpanzee. And it was amazing. So I thought, okay, there's got to be some kind of juvenile or something down there. So, I'm still going down there and overhearing things. And one year I went and I hear this guy talking to these two sisters. And I said, "Are you Walter?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Can you take me to the place where you saw the Bigfoot?" He goes, "Yeah, sure." So he went with his wife and daughter and son, and these two sisters came. And the one sister had a boy and a girl. So we started out in this shadbush trail behind the playground. And as time went on, the girls had left, the mom had left. So it was just me and Walter and his son and this girl's son. So we're walking and we get to the top of the hill, and our objective was to go to the beach. And so we're walking, and we get to the top of this hill, and I go, let's walk a little further down the hill. It looks kind of cool. There's a tree falling, and there's a brook down there. Let's just go down there. In the meantime, we hear this whistle, and one of the sisters knows how to whistle, without the hand. She just whistles, and we hear a response on the other side of us, on the right side. And then she would make another whistle, and then you'd hear a response on the other side. So going in and going down this hill, they followed us. I think it was the mom and the juvenile, mimicking, whistling, and then this hoot owl. Oh my God, this must be the craziest, funnest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Hearing this was exciting. And we get down to the bottom, and he goes, "Oh, it's not taken care of. There's too much grown up, grasses and stuff." So we stopped at this rock, and one of the little boogers, "Oh my gosh, I see this black arm." And I'm thinking, okay, I believe kids more than I do adults. So I said, "Okay, let's go take them some Skittles." So, I always had Skittles with me. And so we walked up this huge hill. We get up the top, there's a log there, and there's nothing there. You don't see nothing. You don't hear nothing. I said, "Okay." And I'm giving him some Skittles. I said, "Let's give the little juvenile some Skittles." So we put some on the log there. And I'm looking in the trees. Now, this is the spring. This is the first weekend of every May. There's nothing. You can't see nothing. There's nothing there. And I could see, other than the fact that there's leaves still from the fall, but I don't see no arm. And we're like, "What?" So we go back down the hill, and on the way back, the little boy goes, "Oh, look, there's footprints." So I go over there, and I took a picture of a 15 and a half foot, the female footprint. And then beside it, now mind you, this was only one footprint. Now, how weird is that? And then one footprint of the juvenile, which was approximately, I don't know, 6 or 7. It was small, but one thing I did notice was that the female kind of walked on the inside of her left foot because it was about a half an inch deeper. So I thought that was interesting, but there was no other footprints, and I think, something's not right. So on the way back, they're whistling back and forth and mimicking, and that was a lot of fun. That was probably one of the most funnest things I ever had in my life. That was better than meeting Boy George in Hollywood Boulevard, and which he was a jerk. Anyway, needless to say, that was a cool experience. And then another time, I had met a couple of guys, and I said, "Well, they go, let's go out Bigfooting." And I go, "Okay." So that year, I think I brought my daughter and my granddaughter, and we went up and down, I think it's Route 1. And I would take these sandals I got from Goodwill that were like leather sandals, and it sounded like wood knocking. So I'd go up and down, and my daughter, says, "Mom, what, do you believe in unicorns and fairies too?" And still makes fun of me. So we're over by the horse camp, and she starts babbling. She whoop. and then, she just starts babbling. And then I hear a response in the grass. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is too much. So, but she started having panic attacks. So they went back. We all went back to the tent, and the guys ended up coming over to my tent. And they said, "Let's go out." It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were just driving around in his van. And I sat up front, and we were headed towards the marina. So we're going towards the marina, and when it's really, really dark outside, you kind of just look at the headlights. You're just looking, you're driving, and you're looking at, you just see the headlights. You know what I mean? The light. So all of a sudden he goes, "Oh my gosh, did you see that?" And I go, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to sound, goofy or crazy. And I said, "Well, what did you see?" And he said, "I saw a leg." And I go, "Yeah, I saw that too." It was a little black leg, and it had probably crossed in front of us, but we caught the tail end of it, the left leg going up the embankment. So that was our big thing for that night. And then we drove around over by the beginning of the Stonehouse Trail. And we're sitting in that parking lot, and some people were asleep in their cars. There was a bunch of guys there, and I didn't feel threatened at all. And we were just talking and laughing, and all of a sudden we hear this noise, and it was kind of a couple times it happened, and they go, "Well, what is that noise?" And I said, "It kind of sounds like a truck changing gears. And so we're quiet for a second, and then we go back to laughing and talking, and we hear it again. And then they go, "I don't think that's a truck." And then they all got scared, and they all took off and left me there by myself. And I go, "What's wrong with you guys?" So it's probably somebody, the dad in the grass sleeping, trying to sleep, and we were probably too loud and obnoxious, and so we ended up leaving, and that's probably what it was. It was probably the grunting of the dad, and we were interrupting his sleeping. So that was pretty fun. That was that same night too. Um, and since then, um, I met this. He was Dr. Pete, and I think Friday night I spent the night in my car, and they have like different activities, and I met this guy. His name was Dr. Pete, and I don't know why, but he knew. I told him I slept in my car. He goes, "Oh, no, 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 we won't have that." He goes, "I got a chalet." And none of my friends showed up. And I'm thinking, okay, great. You believe in Bigfoot. None of your friends showed up. No wonder. But he was so sweet. He took me out to dinner. He said, "Tonight you're going to stay in the chalet. You take the bunk bed. I'll take the main room." And so he goes, "Just remember that in the morning I have to go to the Greek Orthodox Church in Youngstown." He goes, "Just make sure you take the key card back to the lodge before 11 o'clock." So I thought, that's no problem. So in the morning, we said our goodbyes, and I drove up to the lodge, and I remember seeing the bus for the speakers. And that year, Bob Gimlin was there, and it seems to me that, oh my gosh, Dr. Meldrum was there, and some other people that I didn't really know. But um, I remember seeing that bus when I went in, and when I came out, it was gone. And I was headed towards the family picnic. It started at 12 and the handicap parking. And I'm driving, and I see this big hairy thing on the right side. I'm going, "What the heck is that?" And now, mind you, I had a camera, an old Olympus camera in the car, and binoculars, my dad's binoculars. And I get out of the car and I start walking over there, and I'm prone for falling. So I'm looking at my feet, and there's a lot of holes in the grass there. So once I get there, it's gone. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I know what I saw. I'm not crazy. I see this big mud puddle, and I'm looking around, and I see, deer prints, I see horse prints, I see shoe prints, tennis shoes, everything but a Bigfoot, right? And this thing was swaying back and forth and looking on the ground. It was black, and I don't have any particular memory of what it looked like, other than it was kind of groomed. It wasn't all hairy like it, I don't, it just looked groomed. And um, and I saw a deer trail, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I think he was looking for dinner, and he must have been tracking a deer." So, but I'm still scratching my head, and I walk down towards the lake, and I do a whoop, and I get a response, and who knows? It could be anything. It's Bigfoot weekend, so I take it with a grain of salt. So I'm coming back, and I put some Skittles out, and I wanted to sing Over the Rainbow because that's one of the songs I sing to people when they're ready to pass away, and and so that's like my trademark or something. So I sat down and I was going to sing, and then I remember seeing this truck up there by my car, and I think this girl was mushroom picking, and I thought, oh God, I don't want to start singing and looking all goofy and all that, singing to myself. So I didn't say anything. So I walked up to where I saw it, and I see this tree branch broken. It was about 3 inch diameter, and it was broken. And I don't know. I always heard that meant don't follow me. But look, I don't know for sure. But I looked around, and all I saw was that deer trail. None of the vegetation was disturbed. Nothing. And I thought, this can't be. It had to made some kind of print or something. And so I'm still scratching my head. And then I'm thinking, you know what? I wonder if it can cloak itself, or maybe they're interdimensional. And in the meantime, I'm still listening to your podcast, and I'm still watching YouTube, and trying to figure out what's going on. Well, then one time I heard uh, one of your podcasts, and I'll tell you what, I don't know, it was a girl, and it scared the crap out of me. And I don't scare easily. There were a couple of your podcasts that just scared me to death. So, I'm still thinking, I don't understand all this. And then I heard one of your guys on the podcast say something about the fallen angels. And, then I thought about it. I said, you know what? It makes sense. It makes sense because, well, they've been around for a long time. There's Indian, what do they call it? Petroglyphs. And there's, the rock drawings. They've been along for a long time, and no one ever sees them. Like I never saw them. I mean, people see them, but I think it's a mistake that they see them. It's not meant to be. So 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 in the meantime, my mom started getting dementia, and I took her and my granddaughter down to Berlin, Ohio, and they had detour signs, and I finally made it there. But on the way back, I got lost. And this is another encounter that I had. And I was trying to teach my granddaughter, the right and the left, the difference between right and left. And we came at these railroad tracks. And you remember stop, look, and listen. Okay, so that's what I was teaching my granddaughter. She must maybe have been about 4. So I said, let's look to the right. And I looked, I don't know if anybody else did, but I looked to the right. And I said, let's look to the left. And then I see this tall brown Bigfoot. And what came to mind was that it had this S curve, and it was so skinny. And okay, no one's ever going to believe me, so I'm just going to keep it to myself. So that was that encounter, and I think I was in Brewster. I'm not sure, but go to find out, I went to see a concert downtown Massillon, and it was some Led Zeppelin group, and a couple guys behind me were talking about Bigfoot, and I said, "Oh God, I can't shut up. I just can't keep my mouth shut." So I said something to them, and I told them my encounters, and he said, "Well, someone did have a sighting in Brewster." Thinking, well, maybe that could, maybe that is the same one. I don't know, but I don't know of any place in Brewster that they would go and eat or, deer or anything. So I have yet to find out. So another encounter I had was, I saw was a friend of mine asked me to go to trade her car with her brother's truck. She wanted to move some kind of furniture. And so she took all these different roads, and I asked her one day, I said, what exact road did you take? And she goes, well, why? And I said, I saw something. And she wouldn't tell me. And I wouldn't tell her what I saw. And it was a long time before I did. And I said it was going from east to west, and it was a black one. It was ginormous. And she made so much fun of me. Her and my other friend made so much fun of me. My daughter still makes fun of me. My friends make fun of me. And I just, you know what? I don't care. So once again, we're at A1 Steakhouse. And I don't know why I brought it up to this guy. And he goes, well, I have a house. Actually, it's a cabin in Guernsey County. And you can't see it from the road. And I hear wood knocks at night. And I've never seen them since then, but I thought that was pretty cool that, at Guernsey County, there must be something about the Sasquatch Triangle that they have down there off of 77 at Coshocton and Guernsey, that area. So anyway, just last week, I'm talking to this dad and his kids in Judah with my grandson. And I start talking to him. I said, well, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot and blah, blah, blah. And he tells me the story that when he was 14, his dad, they went on a trip and they were down by Kentucky. And he was saying, oh, my dad won't stop for nothing. I had to go to the bathroom so bad, but my dad must not have to go to the bathroom because he never stops. And he was playing a game, one of those games, those old games that kids used to play. I don't know what it's called. But anyway, he looked out the window and he sees this large thing on the top of this telephone pole. And he didn't know what it was, but it had these big, large red eyes. And so he said he did his research and, well, he said he thought it was the Mothman. And I'm thinking, oh, I do not believe in the Mothman. I don't believe in the Dog Man. But I know what I saw was a Bigfoot. And so I said, okay, that's cool. He saw a Mothman and he never forgot it. But the thing of it is that when people see these things or have these experiences, it changes your life, and it can't be that we're all crazy, and they are they have flesh and blood. They leave prints, but the orbs and not seeing anything, and it's like, I don't know. I think we'll find out. I will find out someday. Um, Another experience I had was I went to the Exploration Gateway, which is a library, and they had for kids, this Bigfoot thing. I said, oh, it might be kind of fun, but it's for kids. But I've never seen that movie, like that Boggy Creek movie. I said, let's go check that out. So I went with a couple friends, And at the end of the movie, I don't know why it came to me. I said to the guy who was showing the movie, I said, when I was 14, I remember a man came to my mom and dad's house, and I remember he sat on the couch with dad, and mom was sitting over there, and I was on the floor just listening. And I don't remember the details, but I do remember he said he was driving 21, which runs north and south and runs into 77 and goes up to Cleveland. And it was late at night, and he sees a cigar-shaped craft following alongside his car. And he looks up, and this is exactly what he said. An ape-like man was staring back at me. Now, mind you, back then when I was 14, I totally had forgotten about this story until I saw that movie, and I don't know what clicked. But I told him that, and nothing makes sense. Just nothing makes sense. And so my theory on Sasquatch was that maybe they're from the fallen angels. Maybe they can, they're interdimensional, or maybe they're not for us meant to see, but perhaps it was just, all these people seen it is because, we're building houses, we're making cities, and we're encroaching on the territory, and that's maybe why we're seeing so many, but I think I think it's just by mistake that we're seeing these things. And then the curious ones, I mean, they do how do you say, reproduce or whatever. They, I wonder if those are the ones that are curious. You always see them. I always hear that they're swaying back and forth and they're curious and they're peeking behind the tree like they're trying to hide and, elusive. So there's got to be something to all this, and people not always seeing something but hearing something, So this, maybe it sounds crazy. Maybe this is a punishment, for these fallen angels that have left God, because God is the only one in charge. I don't care if you're atheist or what religion you are, but God is always in charge, and nobody knows until you die. You know, Jesus Christ came along, and as a Catholic, we believe that there's three or one. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Maybe to show that God is in charge of everything, and of course He wins at the end. Maybe this is their punishment. Maybe this is why they're able to not be there, not see them. You know, as far as being interdimensional, and maybe this whole UFO thing is just a distraction from God. I mean, look at all of the UFOs and Bigfoots and the dog man. I mean, oh my God, it reminds me. I heard a story. I actually went with a guy and his friend to Zor. It was like this town meeting or something. People tell all their stories. And I couldn't believe this woman tells this story in Bath. And it was late at night. She was taking a friend home, and she sees a dog man, like a wolf or whatever. What do you say? Going through the garbage. And I'm just listening to this woman thinking, oh my gosh, whatever. And she tells this whole story, but I try to be respectful, and it gets real quiet. And she goes, you know what? The, the scary thing was it had clothes on. And then I just totally freaked. I just totally freaked. So the dog man and this guy who was talking about the Mothman, I don't know what to think. So my theory, like I said, was just that this might be a punishment, that this is a distraction from God. Because when you think about it, when you see a UFO and you see this little green man and that, all that crap, I've never seen one, but I don't want to ever see one. But needless to say, I still like to learn. I still like to talk to people. I probably, this is my theory on why it's so old. And the young ones that are born, I think they're always going to be curious and just be like kids and do do stupid things like walk out and like this YouTube video I saw this little baby walking out to a human, but then of course who knows this is true or not, but that's all I have to say. I'm still adventurous. I still love music, and I love listening to your stories. And thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for everyone that shares. Because I just got married to a guy named Miguel, and he does listen to watch movies at night. And I used to watch YouTube, but now I got ear pods, so I listen to your stories at night, and sometimes I have a hard time sleeping, but now I really have a hard time sleeping because some of them are really scary. But I end up falling asleep sooner or later. But thank you for, doing what you're doing. And thank you to all your listeners. And I hope you enjoy this story. And and I hope that people believe in God. But if you don't, well, you know, something will happen. Something will happen in your lifetime because God doesn't want to leave anyone behind. He loves us all. Okay? Thank you. That's it.
All right, Andrea, thank you for sharing that with me. And I would like to ask you a few questions before we wrap up the podcast. Is that all right with you?
No problem.
Okay. The black or the brown Sasquatch that you saw, the tall brown Bigfoot, what did it look like?
That looked like it was a little scragglier, and it was very, very thin, and it looks like all the pictures, but the hair was far more different, more what's the word? Unkept, But what stood out the most was this S curve, and it was just like it hadn't eaten forever. And it's like I almost felt sorry for it, but I didn't say nothing to anybody about this, but that's all I can remember is that it was tall, very skinny and lanky, and like I said, it had this S curve, and it wasn't as kept as the other black one I saw. It seemed like the one at that I had seen at Salt Fork was more groomed. I don't know why or how, and there was no smell. I smelled nothing. I just That's what I saw, the brown one.
Okay. I appreciate you for sharing that. Now, would you say it looked more primate or more human?
And that's another thing. It looked more primate. Nothing that I saw ever looked human like, but I've heard people say that they looked human like, and that's what kind of brings me back to, you know, fallen angels, that when people say, "Oh, it almost looked human like," who knows?
Yeah.
But these look like primates.
Yeah, I agree. It just depends on the person's perspective. I think primates look like humans, so it can go both ways.
Well, when you look in their eyes and you kind of feel that connection, and they're very smart. They are very, very smart. Even, the apes at the zoo, you know, very smart. And I can kind of tell when they're women. I don't know if it's men, but I know women have like that sixth sense. You kind of feel, you kind of know what's going on with them when they, I don't know how, it's not communication, but I mean, they do know how to mimic, and they are ape-like, and they do have those characteristics. But the whole thing with the orbs and the UFOs, it just freaks me out. So I don't know.
Yeah,
But they do
absolutely.
have the flat noses and the wide mouths. That I do remember. But what I was thinking when I got out of the car to walk over there was totally beyond me. I don't know what I was thinking. I probably wasn't thinking. But I love to hear when when you tell some of your encounters with the other people, like when you share. I like when you do that. Like, are you able to? Do you feel comfortable sharing with me and the others something that I don't know about, or that maybe that people can learn from you?
I've pretty much shared everything that I got on the YouTube channel, but I do think that you gave a really good tip in the podcast about stop, look, and listen. And that's a really good tip because if you're looking for these creatures, you don't want to continuously walk around, and you definitely want to stop for a while and just observe your surroundings. But I mean, I've told most of my Bigfoot encounters, but there's a few that I haven't told just because I don't know if it was actually Bigfoot. I've had some strange things that I've seen out in the woods as far as like black figures, and they take off running, and I'm just left wondering maybe that was them. It was in the same areas I've had my encounters, but I
Well,
mean,
was it more like a shadow, or was it, you know, how they talk about shadow people, um, or was it like flesh and blood, like running?
no, it was definitely flesh and blood. I mean, upright, jet black. I can almost for sure say it was them, but I didn't see their face. It was like it was one of those incidents that just happened so quick, and
Yeah,
you're just like, what the heck just happened? What was that?
yeah. Was it kind of like out of the corner of your eye, kind of thing?
No, just behind summer foliage, when it's real thick in the summertime. I mean, I'll tell you about an example. I was on the phone with a friend, and I was walking up the driveway, and it's a forested area, and I was talking and looking forward, and I heard this branch break, and it just snapped. I mean, this was probably like 30 yards to my left in the woods, and when I looked, it looked like a black figure took off running, and it was kind of, I don't know how to describe it. The best way I can describe it is like when a turkey takes off running, like its head's kind of bobbing up and down. It was like
Yeah,
that, but it was
yeah.
big. Yeah.
So do you think it didn't want to be seen by you? Like it was trying to run away so you wouldn't see it?
I'm not sure. One part that I forgot to mention was right before that happened, two deer jumped out in front of me onto the right side of the road. So I feel like it was hunting the deer, and like I came between the deer and the Sasquatch.
Uh,
But I don't know if it was a Bigfoot. But I mean, I don't know what else is upright,
right,
bipedal, and jet black like that.
right.
Hmm.
Yeah, your gut instinct is probably true.
Yeah, and
You
when
know?
when it snapped that branch, like when I looked over, one of the other branches was just like swaying back and forth off the tree. So there was definitely something there, but like I said, the woods is so
Yeah.
thick that when it took off, it's just like, what the heck was that?
So I kind of noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems as though now it seems as though you tend to kind of make that your, I don't want to say second job or your second home, or you like to go out in the forest. And I mean, this is something that you go out looking for.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
I don't know you that well, so I mean, I don't know. Is that what you do? Is go out and go out in the forest and hunting for them, or looking for them, or trying to have another encounter, or
I would say I'm just an outdoorsman that enjoys being out in nature, and now that I'm aware of them, I've seen them. I'm always looking for them, but I just like spending time in nature. I mean, no one pays me to go out in the woods, and I mean, it's
okay,
definitely not like a job, but I just make it a priority, and at the same time, I'm
go
out
out
there
and
enjoying nature.
that's good. I these were 3 daytime uh sightings that I had, and like I said, my brothers go hunting and fishing and never came home with the story, except for one time. My eldest brother, um, my dad has some swampland down in Shreve, and anyone in the family goes, duck hunting, and they have some plays down there. I've never been down there before. I guess it's behind the pine tree barn, and my brother's so funny. He goes, I'm gonna stop drinking and smoking. I can't believe it. And I guess he saw a UFO, a cigar shaped UFO, and I guess, they're all in different places. I guess there was one of his friends and then a couple, a man and a woman, and they all come back and they meet each other. And he goes, "Did you see what I saw?" And his friend said, "Yeah, I think so." And the lady said, "Yes." And then her husband says, "No, no, no. My wife is drinking too much coffee, and no, this ain't." He said no, and so apparently they called. My brother called up the Worcester College, and he called up the airport to see if anything was going on, if they were doing any experiments or anything, and apparently they saw a UFO uh, out in Shreve. And all I can say is that I remember that story about that guy talking about the UFO, and then behind my apartment, I like to stargaze. So I'm looking at the stars, and I see this one star zigzag, and then it just disappears. And I called the move, what is it, MUFON, and it's just weird things, like just weird things happen to me. I don't know. I'm glad that you're here to. I'm glad I listened to other people's stories, but it helps, to be able to talk to other people and to listen to other people. It's like therapeutic. So, what else do you? What is your theory as far as what these Bigfoots are?
I'm not really sure what they are, and I mean, I theorize the same as everyone else. A lot of people think they're Nephilim, and people believe that they're supernatural, and I definitely believe that. I mean, I just think that there's a lot more to the universe than what we're aware of, and I mean, could it be an unknown primate? Yes, but at the same time, there's still a lot more to it, and people are seeing the orbs associated with the activity and experiencing
Yeah.
strange things like, I don't know, like this liquid being moving around the woods, and people describe it like the
What?
predator.
Oh, wait a minute. Was that the lady I saw that show on the lady from Lima, Ohio, who went hunting? Is that the same thing you're talking about? And then her husband was a doctor, and I guess she could hear the band from her tree stand. The high school was not too far away, and she saw this, like you said, like I don't know, liquid, or what do you call it, like a saran wrap, or I
Hmm.
don't know. And then she took a picture of it and showed her husband, and then at the same time the band saw I don't know if it was a light or a UFO above the trees. Is that the one you're talking about?
I mean, that's not what I'm referring to, but yeah, I mean, I do remember that story, and yeah, that's a good example of it. I'm just going
Well,
off of
what is
my
this liquid
experiences.
you're talking?
No,
Oh, what is it?
well, I was just saying, like, I've interviewed people that have mentioned that, but yeah, I do remember that off of David Paulides' interviews, and it was a lady from Ohio that was talking about seeing this invisible looking creature, kind of like the predator when she was hunting in her stand by
Isn't
the
that
school.
so weird?
Mm,
Yeah,
But
but I've
yeah,
never heard anything about liquid.
yeah, I don't know if it's liquid, just people talk about it being like see through. And I've had experiences
Oh,
where there's like bipedal footsteps out in the woods, and you just can't see what's there, but it just sounds like a big lumberjack walking around.
you can't see it, but you can hear it. That's what you're saying? That's what
Yeah.
you're saying?
And it paralleled
Isn't that
us.
weird?
Mm-hmm.
So there must be like parallel universes, like I don't know. I don't know. I guess one day we'll all find out.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I mean, Albert Einstein talked about there being other dimensions. The Bible talks about heaven and hell. And I mean, those are dimensions. That's what it's talking about. Other worlds.
Yeah. Like when Adam and Eve, when Eve took that fruit and God made that, uh, the, the, is it the devil? He made him the serpent. The whole thing about the serpent,
Yeah.
that was his punishment. You remember what I'm talking about in the book of Genesis?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. So, so if you want to hear about any other stories about ghosts and stuff like that, one of the things I do when I worked as um, lay senior care, it's like when people have Alzheimer's and they end up not really knowing how to eat and walk and all that, and it's sad. And I would help feed them. And one of the things I did was I would sing over the rainbow because it's something I learned in college. I did that for a grade. And so I would sing that to people passing away. And I still do it. I still sing it to babies. And one day I was singing this song to this woman who was ready to pass away. And her daughter comes out of the bathroom and she's bawling. And then I felt really conscious, oh my God, someone's listening. She goes, "Oh, don't stop. Don't stop. That's my mom's favorite song." So I kind of like squeakily got through it, and that was that. So about 3 days later, um, I smelled this perfume, like an old lady's perfume. And I don't know if it was between sleep and awake. I don't know. I could just smell it. And I thought, I wondered if that was her just saying thank you. So um, every time I sing this to somebody, it seems like something always happens afterwards, and it's usually a smell. Um, and I don't want you to think I'm crazy, but my sister passed away, got hit by a drunk driver out in Texas, and I never got to say goodbye to her. And my one brother flew us out there, and we had her funeral, and I was out on the pier at Galveston saying my goodbyes to my sister, and a gush of air came through my soul, and I could feel like it was like her soul passed through me. And it was the most amazing thing ever. It was awesome. Um, Another time, my other sister died when she was 5 of hydrocephalus, and I was 8, and we had went to some this restaurant, and they had this lady there that was could see spirits and so on and so forth. And I thought, oh, this, my friend wanted to go, and I know what the heck, there's something to do. So we go, and she had said that she saw my grandmother beside me. She was my guardian angel, and I just kind of laughed. And then she goes, "Well, do you still have those yellow roses in the yellow vase beside your bed?" And I'm going, "Oh my God, how did you know that? How did you know that?" And it freaked me out. So then we're down this basement because they're telling us about these ghosts, and I couldn't believe I was using how do you say those rods where you could tell if there's a spirit or something? Because I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. And so, but I just did it for the heck of it. And um, I said to the lady, "If you ever come across my sister, I never got to say goodbye to her either." And so, time goes on, and they're talking about this portal, that spirits come in and out of, and it's kind of scary. And she goes, "Hey, is that lady?" And it's dark down there in the basement. She goes, "Is that lady here that has a sister?" I said, "Yeah, I'm here." And she goes, "Yeah, your sister's here with some little black girl who was in a fire, and it was during the slavery time, and she's playing with this girl. And she wanted me to ask you if you remember that little dolly in the closet, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And then I remembered there was a blue, mom had a cedar closet, and there was a blue doll. She kept a lot of my sister's clothes and dolls and stuff. And there was a doll up there in that cedar closet, and I couldn't believe that she knew that. And I just think that's so strange, just so strange. Um, but the weirdest thing was the very last thing, my dad died, and I never heard anything from my dad. But when my mom died, we went over to Speedway and got some, drinks, and it was a mess. And I thought, I saw this young kid with curly brown hair cleaning, and I said, "Do you work here?" And he goes, "No." I go, "That is so nice that you're doing that for the public. You're cleaning after messy people." And he stopped what he was doing, and he looked at me, and he goes, "Did your mom just die?" And I'm going, "Oh, okay, this is weird." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, she wasn't ready to leave." And I'm going, "Okay, how the hell does he know anything about what happened to my mom?" And this was, she died right when COVID started. And he said she wasn't ready to leave. He goes, "There was a young man that could have done more for your mom, but he didn't." And then I thought, oh crap, maybe he's talking about my little brother who was in charge of everything. And I remember saying, "Why didn't you get mom like therapy? Why didn't you give her some physical therapy?" And instead you got her hospice. But I never said anything to my brother. I mean, I just let it go. And so he's saying this to me, and I just couldn't believe it. And then the last thing he says is, "Your father's in charge." And I'm thinking my dad. I mean, he was German. He was like, you know, he was like very disciplinary and very, raised Catholic. We were all spanked back then. Anyway, and I kept thinking it was my dad, and I'm thinking, geez, is my dad keeping my mom from, you know, coming to me and, saying goodbye, or, you know, I don't know. So then time went past, and we had this, like, it wasn't a Bible study. It was more like a book study on the book of Revelation. And I told them this story, and my friend goes, "It's not your dad. It's your father in heaven. It's your father in heaven." And I'm going, "Oh, that totally makes a lot more sense than my dad, you know." So God has the last word. And so if it was mom's time to go, it was her time to go, you know? So, but it's funny that people need to understand that when Christ died on the cross, and he rose from the dead, and he came back to prove to all the disciples that, yeah, Thomas, doubting Thomas, put your hand through my wounds, and so there's life after death. And so, but there's good and there's evil. So people have to be sure that they have to know that if you're going out looking for these Bigfoot, they're not actually, it is a spiritual. Yeah, they're flesh and blood, and they do procreate, but there's something just not right about them, and they are taking, too much attention from God. So just just be careful. When you go out and you're doing this, just remember God wins in the end. You know, this is all fun and games, but He wins in the end. Okay. So thank you again, Miguel.
All right, Andrea, I appreciate you for sharing your experiences with me, and that really means a lot.
Well, it means a lot that you do what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching the videos and for sharing your encounters here on Sasquatch Theory.
You're welcome. You're welcome. God bless. Take care.
All right, God bless you and take care. Big thanks to Andrea for coming on and sharing those encounters. If you've had something similar happen, feel free to get in touch with me sometime, and I would certainly like to log down your encounters and experiences here on the channel. And yeah, it sounds like she's had a lot of experiences, and I feel like she was marked. A lot of people talk about being marked or tagged by these creatures, and being that she's seen multiple creatures and has had many experiences, I would say that this is the case. There seems to be something supernatural about them, or they're just really good predators and they can follow you around. But it does seem like if you talk about these things, they will happen to you. And the Native Americans urged people not to talk about cryptid creatures because they will show up. And yeah, I've seen many strange things in the woods, so I could really relate to Andrea's experiences as far as seeing like a black arm or a black leg moving through the woods. And these things are really sneaky. So you really have to keep your eyes peeled and spend a lot of time in the area that you're researching. And yeah, if you have a Bigfoot encounter, definitely contact me because I would like to hear about it. And I am searching for people to do video interviews, in-person interviews. So if you know anyone who would be up for that, tell them to reach out. Thank you, everyone. And until the next one, be safe out in the woods.